It's time to get you ready for the Indiana Pacers trade deadline because it's January 15th and almost every player in the NBA can be traded now. So let's talk about the Pacers. What direction should they take? Who are the key players to watch and contracts to keep an eye on? Rhett Bauer is going to help me break it all down today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Thursday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, it's January 15th. It's the last major trade restriction day on the calendar. Everybody but 3 players in the NBA can be traded starting today. This episode comes out the 16th. And so it's time to talk about the trade deadline for the Pacers. What should you be keeping an eye on between the Pacers' record and their finances and where they're headed? It's a very, very complicated deadline in terms of what they should be looking to do and what they'll be able to do and what they should be looking to be able to do. Ironically, those are all 3 different things. Lots of players discussed under the microscope today. The elephant in the room, the player I think is by far the most likely to get traded on the Pacers roster, and so much more as they prep for their stretch run of the season. Thankfully, I wasn't alone. Rhett Bauer joined me for this one to bounce ideas off of each other and make it so I don't scream like a lunatic the entire time. It's really good stuff. Hope you guys enjoy. Let's just get right into the Pacers trade deadline primer. It is January 15th, which means every player that can be traded this season, except for 3 that don't really matter to what we're talking about, can be traded this season, and that is the unofficial start for Tony East of trade season, which means it's time to preview the trade deadline for the Pacers, and boy, oh boy, have they changed how the discussion about their trade deadline will go with their recent run of play. Unless you think they need to trade for Jay Huff, Doug McDermott, or Ariel Hockporty, they can trade for anyone you think they should acquire. And we're going to get to the basic high-level overview / really in the weeds on all of it today, and I can't do it alone. He's back for the first time since, oh man, I should have checked the date in our DMs. It's Rhett Bauer. Rhett, the founder of Creativity. How are you?
I'm great. It's been such a slog founding all of this creativity that we haven't been able to get a chance to pod, but more so just happy to be here. And trade season is among us. And as much as Jay Huff would be a good addition to the team, I'm fine to not talk about him.
Yeah, not an issue. Don't even think the Grizzlies care. So, yeah, every player now, including Obi Toppin, he crossed his trade restriction today. This comes out a day after, but he crossed his trade restriction on Wednesday. Can be dealt now, so moves can be done. Things can happen. Pacers traded for Siakam right after this deadline, even though it didn't actually matter for that specific trade last year. Just how things go. So let's start by just looking at the Pacers, because when they were 10-15, it was kind of like, they're trying to be good, but that's not really the record of a team that should be going for it. And now they're in 6th and looking like a good team exactly at the halfway point, but they also have a lot of financial strong considerations. So on one hand, I feel like the direction is obvious now. On the other hand, their financial situation makes it not obvious. Where do you think they should be thinking given their recent run of play or even their record to this point?
I think Haliburton's injury changes a little bit. Obviously, they know the severity of it, and while he's out, I don't know how much we know about the long-term nature of it, but I think if they were, if Haliburton were healthy and they beat the Cavs again last night, if Haliburton were healthy and they were really putting it on a bunch of good teams and extending that win streak, I could see maybe stirring the pot and addressing and being like, hey, the vibes are high, but let's push some chips a little bit. But at this point, I don't think it should be that aggressive of a trade deadline for the Pacers. It should probably be more about the months that are upcoming, because the contract situation for Myles Turner and Andrew Nembhard do not exactly coexist well for a team that probably doesn't want to pay the tax.
Yeah, it's complicated. The financial part I would like to get to is our second point of reference for the team. But yeah, they have saved themselves and put themselves in an obvious, at least, direction at the deadline. Outside of expirings or an obvious situation that we'll get to, they should not be selling anything. If anything, they should be looking for either, like you said, small upgrades for the next few months, big upgrades if it makes sense.
Yep.
Or like, oh, this is a player who will be with them for years and years and years, who's good.
Yes.
But if those are available, that's a high asset cost and it's hard to do. When they were 10-15 and just lost to Charlotte, I would never have thought that that by this point it'd be like, oh yeah, they should obviously buy. But if stuff is available to them, they should. I think that's the direction they have hit because, yeah, Haliburton injury does, I guess, change things a little, but the timing of the Paris trip makes it easy. He might not even miss that much, if any, more time since it's groin, not hamstring. So if he comes back and they just keep winning, like they should try to do what they can to make themselves better within reason. But yes, the other part of the overview of where the Pacers are is money, fun, goofy year, because this is the second time this has happened with this front office. And I think what they did on the way to both landing spots was smart. It's just how it goes. The cap barely went up this year. And then they re-signed a bunch of players who fit their style and are good. And then this is what they had a bunch of injuries and had to trade for Thomas Bryant and do stuff with Moses Brown. And so they're right up against the tax. And they're good, but they're not like, let's blow over that tax level good. Maybe some people think they are. And if they think they are, they should go over it. But I would imagine if they're going to go into it, they would like to start the repeater tax clock next year. And because of some bonuses, several, $2.5 million in some player contracts, they are even closer to the first apron. They're like less than $5 million from that, which makes some other trades complicated. They're not hard capped. I think they're hard capped at the second apron right now, but not the first apron. So there's just a lot of weird financial things. Like every fake trade I see, I'm immediately like, oh, that's not legal. I would put it over the first apron. So there's a lot of tricky factors pushing on them that if they were trading for someone making, I'm making this up, but like 12 million or less, it'd be pretty easy for them to pull it off if they wanted to do it. Anyone making more than that requires a lot more thinking and complications. And that's fine. There's still ways for them to get better doing that, or two swaps or whatever. It's just not super easy to go a certain direction with those sort of constraints on you. And that's why I think what you said about, maybe not a huger thing, or like looking really at the next couple months makes more sense than giant Siakam midseason trade, Karis LeVert midseason trade level stuff that they've done in years past.
Well, also the thing with those two names that you just brought up in Siakam and LeVert is there was an obvious path to the salary for both of those.
Yeah.
And in this case, like unless you're trading Myles, you don't have a big salary. Like Obi Toppin at 12 is almost 13, I suppose, but that's the best, that's the highest that you've got. And then you get into Aaron Nesmith and TJ McConnell. And I don't know about you, but TJ McConnell seems unlikely because of the
He's
extension they
untradeable
just
this
gave
year
him.
anyway.
Right,
Legally,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. So very unlikely then. And then Aaron Nesmith, I think you and I both agree at a flat 11 million in the next 3 years might be a top 5 non-rookie contract in the entire league value-wise.
I think it is
So
right
like,
now, yes.
yes. And so, there's the player value. Maybe you could get someone better than Nesmith, but are you going to get a better contract value for where the team's going to go? Not likely. So you're really just looking at Obi Toppin's money plus whatever other young player. But the young players have been really good. Like Mathurin and Jarris have been good.
Yeah.
And so what are you possibly getting under that like $20 million threshold that's going to be good enough and under long enough term money to make it worthwhile and make you noticeably better without stirring the pot on the way that the chemistry's been going? I have no clue. Doesn't seem like a great path to thread there.
Yeah, it's really tricky, and that's why I think anyone who makes more than Toppin basically is just by default a tricky trade, right?
Yes.
Unless it's like someone you could trade Myles Turner straight up for, and we'll talk about Turner a lot today, obviously. But it's a very tough needle. No, it's a very tough thread to do, and they've put themselves in that situation on purpose. That's fine. It got even tighter with the moves they had to make midseason because of their injuries, but it does make trades hard. Like I hate it to be the wet blanket, but like the Cam Johnson stuff came out, and it's like that trade is hard to make it. It probably has to be two players who actually play, at least maybe three. And if it's only two, and then like James Wiseman's salary, like, okay, that's great. But if two of those players probably have to be Nesmith, Toppin, or Toppin in a lottery pick, like, is that actually worth it? Like that's what they're going to run into with basically any package for anyone that doesn't include any of their top 3 salaries. So keep that in mind as we venture into this discussion that, yes, there's a lot of stuff that they should think about. They're good right now, and they have a pretty long runway of that because they have Siakam and Haliburton for 4 years, including this one, plus a lot of other guys for a long time. That's all great. They should be happy about their position. And as the cap grows 10% for the next X number of years because of the TV deal, they'll have more flexibility in future seasons. Maybe not as much next year because of the Turner stuff, but still more than this year. But then they'll have even more and more and more as time goes on. So that's the setup for what situation they're actually in. Rhett, would you like to go the nerdy direction first or the obvious elephant in the room direction first?
Oh, would I like to go the nerdy direction? Absolutely. But let's start with the obvious so that we can make sure people stay in this podcast for longer than what it'll take when we get super into the numbers.
Yeah, the nerdy direction is I think there's unfortunately one player who is by far the most likely Pacer to get traded at the deadline that we'll get to later. Hey, everybody, short little break so we can talk about two great groups of people. First up, the good people over at FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting right now. New customers on FanDuel can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets. If you win your first bet, that's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel. There, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We also need to talk about Skims. Skims. When I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try. And it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear. Fit and comfort have always been a big deal to me, and just finding the right style can be challenging for everybody. Skims changes all that. Their men's line offers something for everyone. Boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. Their boxer briefs hook everybody. They're perfect for an active lifestyle. They move with me. They never lose their shape. They stay in place all day. The 5-inch stretch brief is the way to go, whether you're working out, running errands. The most comfortable and reliable underwear I've ever owned. Plus, the lightweight material feels amazing, almost like you're wearing nothing at all. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and Skims stores. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcast in the survey. Select our show in the drop-down menu that follows that. Skims.com/LockedOnNBA. Yeah, the elephant in the room is Myles Turner, right? And that is because of his contract reality. And that is, as everybody knows, but just to restate for those who might be tuning in for the first time, he cannot be extended this season on any team, Pacers or anyone else. So come July 1st, or come, I guess that's new. There's new rules, Tony. Come the day after the NBA Finals, he is a free agent. Guaranteed unrestricted free agent, can sign a deal wherever he wants. I've talked a lot about the lack of cap space teams in the league, especially cap space teams who might actually want a center, but just the way the league has shifted with aprons and sign-in trades are the way of the land now for players to move around and teams like to get stuff back. Like, you just never know. And unrestricted free agency is not fun. And if the Pacers do have to re-sign Myles Turner, that he'll cost more than he does now, which is, just under $20 million. We've seen what the center market is. It's closer to the mid to high 20s now. There's just a lot of factors at play there. But the most important one for the Pacers is he's expiring. And the obvious starting point would be, well, they could just keep him. He's good. He's playing games for them right now. He's playing well. And if they're a team trying to win and he proved he can play well in the playoffs last year, great, just keep him. And that's all fine and dandy. But we have seen with this front office that they've thought about, even with good teams, that long-term part. Reference point 1. Last season, after trading for Pascal Siakam, they traded away Buddy Hield at the trade deadline for stuff, right? The year they extended Myles Turner, Rick Carlisle said, yeah, if he had not extended, this would have been different. And that year they finished 37 wins, 35 wins, I can't remember, but they were trending decently well that year as a team, right? Even this front office has shown their forward thinking, and that's usually smart, but they're good enough now that it's harder to think that way. So I'm laying a lot of ground to say, do you think they actually would do it? What would it take for them to actually trade Myles Turner? Because I will bury my lead and say first, I don't think I would do it unless I'm getting a better center in the trade.
I think, and I've walked through the exercise a couple times of okay, what would it take? And of the centers that are available, even a like a Jalen Duren or a Nick Claxton or a Walker Kessler or anything like that, maybe if there was something else going on and then you locked up a younger center that, either on a rookie deal or has a couple years under there, but then the play style changes so
A lot.
much. Like
Yeah.
it is so impossible. Like how many other centers out there can you play with Pascal Siakam and be confident that they enable each other to do what each wants to do well? Very, very few. It's
Very
why
few.
Siakam wanted to come here.
Yeah.
And so I can't I can't see what it would take is a feeling of either, hey, we don't trust the medicals, or hey, we don't trust that we can retain. And I don't think either of those are the case. And I don't think there's a deal that's going to blow the doors off enough to really shake it up that much.
I agree with all of that. And if they trade him, let's going back to last year, for an example, they traded away Buddy Hield, but they
Yes.
were very quick to turn around and be like, we got McDermott. We got a different shooter.
Yes.
And that didn't work. the idea made sense. He shot it really well for the Spurs last year, but it was very obvious, like, hey, we downgraded, we sold, but we got a thing that can
Right.
kind of fill this role, and he's going to be in our rotation.
Yes.
Like, if you trade away Turner and don't get a center back, you then have to do something else. Like, Thomas Bryant can't play 30 minutes a night at the 5, and he can't do the stuff that Turner does, like you just described. And they don't have anyone else behind him because of their many injuries. Enrique Freeman's playing nice in the G League, but you're not ready for him to back up 5 on a real team trying to win. So they would have to do a second trade, which leads me to believe that if they did trade Turner, they would like to get back a different center. But then what are you actually doing? And if you're getting a better player, they'd probably make more. So you have to include someone else or other picks and stuff. And by the way, they can't trade their 25 first or their 27 first because of the Stepien rule from the Siakam trade. So I do think like you said, if there is a medical reason, they're like, he's going to decline in his late 20s and early 30s.
Yes.
Okay, then you have to think hard about this, right?
Yep.
Or if it's like, hey, we've gotten our back channel, like, hey, Myles Turner wants this much. Well, that's way more than we think he should get paid. Then I think you go, okay, we have to think hard about how we're going to handle this if we're the Pacers. But I think the most likely outcome is they say, we think we can re-sign him, and the market dynamics might work in both of their favors a little bit, which leads to a nice compromise of probably a shorter than 4-year deal in some way. And they reassess in the summer how they want to balance their contracts and the tax and all that. So I think that Myles Turner will be the most commonly discussed player name because everyone's going to look at the team and go, oh, look, an expiring contract. I have a good player. And that's natural. And I think I will also talk a lot about Myles Turner, but he's good. He's good at the sport. He's making a career high number. Maybe not anymore. He was for a long time making a career high percentage of his threes this season. His defense has ticked up the last month as the team's has. He fits the exact style of their star players. There's just so many reasons they should want him specifically. And so they'll have to do the same thing they did with Siakam last year and be scared of free agency. But it worked out with Pascal. And if it can work out with Myles too, I think stylistically they'd be happy with that. But it is certainly going to be the biggest thing they have to consider for the next how long is this? I should know this. 3 weeks? 3 weeks. There we go.
3 weeks. Yeah. No, and I mean, I think that I mentioned it last summer. I think I messaged you as like, how important do you think it would be for the Pacers legacy that Myles Turner has already cemented, as far as he's a top 5 longest tenured Pacer ever in the history of the franchise. And if he signs for, I think it was another 3-year deal, he would be tied with Reggie.
It's crazy.
Maybe not Reggie, maybe it was Smits. But anyways, he'd be top 3 ever in Pacers tenure. And I just, sometimes that matters, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know, but it just doesn't seem like Myles Turner and trade rumors, we're back, baby. This is we had it for a season when he couldn't be traded, but now we're, it's fine. But I just don't see it making sense for where the team is on the floor. I don't see either a side step that fits stylistically or is a little worse stylistically, but enables some other stuff on the cap sheet. And so it's an obvious elephant in the room, but it's the obvious part is it's the obvious elephant in the room isn't until this summer when it's an actual problem, because there isn't a clear next step right now.
Well, the other part of the less fun part of the elephant in the room is Isaiah Jackson's probably gonna be cheaper now if they keep him.
Right. Which is
that
not
actually
fun.
It's not good. It's not good for Isaiah Jackson, and it's not a good thing for the Pacers that this ascending young player is going to be out for all of this year and worse next year. But is like Sadiq Bey is going to be the guy for those unaware. I will be talking about Sadiq Bey with Isaiah Jackson a lot, and like how Sadiq Bey's contract life changed when he got hurt right before restricted free agency. If Isaiah Jackson is now cheaper, like if they get their pick into the 20s, which they still have some winning to do to get there, like they could probably keep Turner and barely have to do any skimming of contracts to really duck the tax if they even need to or feel like they need to, right? So that's great. Like they might not have to do as big of a thing because of that, but they still probably have to do something, right? Just
Yes.
like 25 million away with no pick, no Jackson, no Wiseman, no James Johnson, no Thomas Bryant. So it's still some juggling to figure out, right? Not going to be fun at all, but it's easier now than it was actually coming into the season because of the way their injury situation has gone. And that makes it even easier in theory to want to re-sign him and thus harder to trade him now unless you're getting an obvious upgrade. But if you're getting an upgrade, they're probably more expensive. And so you're trading away a second player on top of Myles Turner. It's very their situation is very complicated that's why I set the groundwork with the beginning with you, because I mean, I know you know it, but everything they do is going to have so many factors pushing in on each other this year that's hard to
Yes.
see what all this could be.
Well, and the other obvious elephant in the room is the other thing that happens next summer, and that's Bennedict Mathurin. Like, what is going
Well.
right? Like,
You also
so
got to something I would like to talk about. Yes.
yes, and so like there's the idea that yes, they'll likely have to do something to make a move for the cap purposes, but if you assume that everyone is relatively healthy and they continue playing the way that they're playing, like Matherin's going to look around and be like, I deserve to get paid. And Jarris is going to look around and say, I deserve to play. And so is Nemhard, who got paid, and that starts this summer. Shepard, like there's going to be a lot of guys around that might also contribute to what might be coming, which could make it'll make life painful on the front office to have to make those decisions, but also will like contribute to the motivation to do something when it comes to balancing out the cap sheet.
Yeah, Matherin becomes rookie extension eligible this summer. Neesmith got one. Haliburton got one. Those were a little easier than someone like Matherin, who's had, let's say, unique career so far. Playing better as a starter, fitting in better, doing the stuff he needs to do to establish, like, hey, I could be a Pacer long term. But what exactly is this player worth? The player they need him to be and the player he can be and the player he has been at times are all very different things. And like on one hand, he'd be like, hey, Jalen Green, look what he got. Like I could do that. And the Pacers would say, no, no, we're not going to do that. But then like you get nowhere. Like it's I don't even know what I would start with negotiation wise. And that's why I use Jalen Green's number. But if Ben Matherin's getting 25 to 30 million the year after next, then you really have to think about cutting some long-term salaries to Pacers. And I don't know how you do that. And I don't know if they should be like, yeah, let's trade Ben Mathurin right this second. But as we saw with Josh Giddey, like the value can be goofy when you know the rookie extension is coming or is possible. And that's even happened for Giddey when he got traded, which becomes a big part of it too. So I don't think they should trade Mathurin right now, but I think they should think about what that's going to look like, or at least some other player who's going to get paid in the next 2 years. Whether that's Shepard, Walker, Furphy, even. They have to think about all this stuff.
Yes. Well, and two, like I think that is the other, consideration at this deadline is okay. Can we, Mathurin is extension eligible next summer, but Jarris will be extension eligible the summer after that. Crazy how rookie contracts work in draft classes. But like
Wow.
if it wouldn't be surprising if that was a consideration of like, okay, we might get worse, but we might make life a little bit easier, or we'll get another asset, or we'll clear some salary or something like that. So like that is one of the moves that would be less surprising. It would be painful because that would be losing, a lottery pick who's been playing well and
yeah.
does a lot of things that the Pacers don't have other options that can match. But that would be one of the moves that I would not be surprised to see is like, okay, kicked the rookie pay can down the road a little bit, or got somebody who's cost controlled over the next 3 years when, assuming Myles has another deal, the books are starting to get a little bit tight on the cap sheet.
I would consider that surprising, but I would Like if they did it, I would be like, okay, I get it. You know what I mean?
You would see the motivation rather
Yeah,
than a Myles
yeah.
Turner trade is like, holy crap, like that's
Well,
a
I would get that too,
shock.
but I would also be like, what do they know?
right, right.
Oh, there's something I don't know here. Yeah,
Hmm.
I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree. Like, because the next summer's free agency, as of right now, like they're going to add a first round pick, presumably other players, is just Mathurin, and I guess
Yes.
like Wiseman or something. Like if they sign another 1 year deal next summer, right? So that it's really Turner, Mathurin are the guys that will get discussed the most for that reason. They're the most
Yep.
close on the sheet, upcoming free agents for the length of their deal, and they're worthy of significant raises in one case and a small raise in the other case. And it's going to be tough to afford that at some point for the Pacers. They don't have 2026 first, so the math juggling next year will be a little easier. But yeah, that's the reality they put themselves in. And the NBA right now, everyone's like, oh, a deep team is really valuable. Golden State chased that. Cleveland chased that. Boston has that. Good teams try to do it because it worked for the Pacers well last year. The consequence of that is when you have a good deep team, all those good players would like to be paid fairly, and it's hard to afford lots of good players. And so eventually, if the Pacers would like to be as good as it seems like this core could be, they should pay the tax at some point, right?
Yep.
And if they're going to do that, they should want to push back the repeater tax clock as far as possible, which is why I keep saying this year's probably not the year to do it, although they're good enough now that maybe they at least have to be like, do we have a meeting about this? But either way, that's why their finances matter so much, and they have to consider these things. So if they want to keep both Mathurin and Turner, they could pay the tax in a future year, but not this year, especially when the tax becomes less punitive in a few years. One more break here, guys. We can talk about Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%. Plus, you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 per month for 1 year from the first match, and you must keep in an IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings. Account interest rate claim based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC is a member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Right, it's time to get nerdy.
Let's do it.
Let's get
As if
some
we haven't
nerdiness.
already. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, we haven't already. We already said that the least likely Pacer to be traded this year is TJ McConnell because he legally cannot be. Everybody else legally can be. Congrats to TJ McConnell on being in Indy for the season. The most likely Pacer to get traded at the trade deadline, Rhett Bauer, is
James Wiseman.
James Wiseman. I don't really think it's close, unfortunately. It's just how it is. To go back to last, actually, I'm not even gonna go back to last year first. Let's start with Wiseman specifically. The Pacers are like this close. You can't see me on YouTube. My fingers are close together. This close to the tax, and this is just a minimum contract that is straight up dead money for the season and can be easily removed from any team, including the Pacers' salary books next year. So it's effectively a minimum expiring contract. That's so easy to move, like comically easy. Last year, Delano Banton got moved on a minimum deal to an over-the-cap Blazers team. Robin Lopez got salary dumped from the Bucks to the Kings for some reason. 2 over-the-cap teams. Like moving a minimum deal is super easy. Like any other team that's not going to end the trade deadline over the tax if they take another deal would be like, yeah, okay, whatever. Because all it will take on February 6th, in theory, is like a heavily protected second rounder or just like, here's the cash. You pay the rest of his deal. Here's a little more for helping us out, right? And that helps the Pacers a ton. Getting $2 million away from the tax, they could sign 10 days. They could convert a two-way with the open roster spot at some point, right? Like for a team, they're not injured anymore, but if they battle more, they'll want to have that flexibility. That is super valuable. And so there's no reason to have Wiseman on the team for this season unless they want to keep him for next year. But I think they've kind of figured out, hey, we have a better backup center on our team already in Thomas Bryant. Who knows if they can actually keep him or not? But either way, I think the assessment has come in from their financial situation that Wiseman is definitely the most likely player to get traded. And because he's on a minimum deal, any team, literally any team in the NBA can take Wiseman, except for maybe some second apron teams. So it's not even that hard to find a trade partner. It could be anybody. There's no like fit considerations at all. It's just, are you going to end this trade under the tax? Great. He makes however much the rest of the year. Here's that plus some more in cash. Thanks. We'll help you out in the future. See ya. It's like that seems so much like what they should be pursuing. They could convert a Freeman. They could sign several 10 days or even a permanent deal. And like, you can clown how important that is. The Knicks signed a player on the last day of the season last year who got thrown into a sign and trade freaking Karl Anthony Towns like last summer. Like, that flexibility and having someone on the roster matters. It matters. Even if it's like, you might think it's nothing, but it's never nothing, right? So that flexibility is important with how close they are to the tax. And so that's why it sucks that the reasoning it's the case is because of a devastating injury 4 minutes into the season. But I think James Wiseman is by far the most likely Pacer to be traded.
The devastating injury, obviously, that's miserable. But on the other hand, his contract was non-guaranteed, and by getting injured,
Yeah.
it was then fully guaranteed.
He did get
So
money from it. True.
he got. I mean, I imagine he would be confident enough in himself to continue playing and then have gotten that money anyways and not torn his Achilles. But anyways, so yeah, I looked and I was looking to see how many players could you shed a little bit of salary and end up getting some reinforcements at the 5. And there's some options. I'm not going to get into them, but at the very least, you just dump him wherever, like you said, and you've got, that 31 to 55 protected second from Charlotte this year. It's like it could be nothing if you wanted it to. And then, you give yourself some more wiggle room, whether that is now for if something else happens or later when you might you might want to move some things around for whatever contracts you might want to sign for future endeavors, we'll say. So it's very easy. I think that was, of all of the players on the roster, even when he was signed, it was like, okay, if this gets guaranteed, like, he would still probably be the most likely to be traded, even if he wasn't hurt. That's just the nature of where he's at.
It's the nature of the salaries. So last year, Delano, Banton, and Cash from the Celtics to Portland, and Portland got and the Boston Celtics got a protected second. Like, yep. Fun, really interesting. Robin Lopez and Cash to the Kings, draft rights to Dimitros Agravanis to the Bucks. Woo, really exciting trades. Like, no one understands. Even Corey Joseph to the Pacers was a minimum salary dump last year that I think people forget because he got waived immediately, and the Pacers got cash. They got a bunch of cash for that trade. I'm probably missing one. I think there was one more last year, but the Pacers were involved in one of these, right? Like, if you make the minimum, you can go anywhere. And the Pacers, Flip a true step. That's who the other one was. So there are 4 last year, right? It's just how teams do it. They should do this. And so the Pacers are certainly going to consider this. Now, to take it a step further, in theory, Isaiah Jackson fits the same bill. He's on an expiring, completely dead money contract right this second. And the difference is they have invested a lot in him. They know he's good. He was going to be their backup this year. And I have to say something and then immediately correct myself. He could be a restricted free agent this year, so the Pacers could keep him, and that's great. But as someone who just tore his Achilles, I think if the Pacers gave him a qualifying offer, he would just take it instantly. Like, oh, cool, that's a lot of money. So they probably want him to be an unrestricted free agent, but they also probably want to keep him because it'd be cheaper to have him on that next deal, and then they could, have him be the third center and have someone else be the second center until he returns. There's just a lot of balancing there. So in theory, shedding his $4.4 million would be nice, but like in theory, he also could be a cheap, good backup 5 next year, the year after on a shorter deal. So I don't think it's as likely they would consider that, but as an expiring, completely dead money deal, they might have to think about it in the same ways as Wiseman, even though the difference is Wiseman is way easier to trade because the minimum can go anywhere and Jackson's deal cannot go absolutely anywhere.
Yeah. Per this guy, Tony East. Yeah. On Forbes, qualifying offer of 6.3 for Isaiah Jackson.
Yes.
Like, I don't know for sure, but that's probably right around where he would want to be. So I don't know, you can probably work on that with him in some capacity. I don't know exactly what that looks like.
2 years for 6.3. Great. We did
it. Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I think that there's something to that, but I think too is like knowing that qualifying offer is where it is and the chance that he might just sign that could treat him like, and other teams might, sometimes people trade for guys that are going to be restricted free agents thinking, okay, cool, now we control what this guy can sign for. In this case, you may treat him as an expiring, like you said, because you don't want to tender him that qualifying offer. Yeah. So depending on what else is going on, 4.4 is roughly twice as much as 2.2. So if you really need to shed some space, you can get into that and do so. But I don't think it's likely that he gets moved just because they're invested in him and what he's shown like the growth that he's shown, it hasn't always been what we'd hope for like every single year. It's like, what are we looking for Ajax? Like, stop fouling so much. And then it's like, well, he's fouling the same, but it's different, but it's the same. And so like he's growing and he's still somehow 23, which feels just crazy to me. So I don't think it will happen, but matching salary is tough. As we've talked about a couple times.
It is. Thomas Bryant can be traded. Doesn't make any sense for them to do so. I mean, there's just a lot. He's on the minimum deal is the only reason I'm bringing that up, because we brought up the minimums with Wiseman. So that's why I think Jackson and Wiseman will get brought up a lot too. So I think we've nailed the 4 names that'll be said the most. The Saddiq Bey reference, by the way, he tore his ACL March of 2024, which was right before he was going to be a restricted free agent. And there was reporting he wanted like a crap ton of money, which was like way too much for what he was. But then the Hawks did not give him a qualifying offer because he tore his Achilles. So he signed a 3-year, just under $20 million deal with the Wizards. The first year of that, totally dead. He's not going to play this year. So they're really paying 2 years, $20 million for Saddiq Bey, which is great. He could be a young, good wing when he comes back. But they're paying for a rehab year, and that's why his contract is so much less than he was projected to get, because the hope is that those last 2 years are good years. The difference is Jackson will not have a full rehab year on his next deal. So maybe I'm underselling what he could get. Like maybe he wouldn't take the qualifying offer, but like 2 for 8 or something, and you don't know. Because like Jahlil Okafor, I talked to him, he tore his Achilles, and he was like, yeah, it took me 1.5 years to feel like myself again on the court. Like, I don't know what it's different for everybody, but if that's what it takes for Jackson, 1.5 years is early 2026, right? So
yes,
they have to think about that when they cash in how much he should be worth, and he has to think about that as well. So the Saddiq Bey reference will be made a lot, even though their circumstances timing-wise are different. But we've seen what that looked like and how he switched teams because of the qualifying offer and all that. So that's a consideration, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to pull up like what the center market was this past offseason just to see what other options might be out there. Yeah, but
Everyone, if he had been healthy, he would have been like, "Hey, see what Mo Wagner got?" Like that.
Yes, Goga at
Goga,
9.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that also does lend itself to sort of the recovery nature of the timing might, like you said, dissuade that qualifying offer. But the fact that we're talking about it and maybe thinking about it, that has to be factored in some capacity. So I said before the season that if he did get extended, that I thought he would be more likely to be traded because of the number, even though I'm aware of the poison pill and all that stuff. But yeah, so we'll see. I'm interested to see what that looks like, because it's so rare now to see like, oh, he might just take the qualifying offer. That used to just be a threat for like guys like Zion, who's gonna be, oh, he'll just take qualifying offer and then have a no trade, and like, but now it's a very real thing with guys that are hurt, and that's just a new developing landscape.
That's how it goes. All right, I have nothing to say on Furphy. Andrew Nembhard, they should never ever trade, especially because his salary match in a trade this year is the minimum, so it's a super hard thing to actually do. Thomas Bryant, nothing to say there. James Johnson, nothing to say there. We did Wiseman. We did Jackson. So McConnell can't be traded. They're not going to trade Siakam or Haliburton. We did Turner. That leaves the following players to briefly discuss. Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd, Obi Toppin, and Aaron Nesmith.
Yep.
I will start by saying I'll say this for Nembhard next year. Nesmith's contract is so good that it would take a lot for me to consider trading him if I'm the Pacers, because his play level alone is probably like first round pick value, but he's like being paid half of what he should as a player. So it's more than that. I saw fake trades throwing him in for Cam Johnson. And I'm like, okay, I guess I get why people think Cam Johnson's better, but like the contract and ability gap is not extra stuff from the Pacers to me already. So that's tricky.
He's also just not better, but that's
yeah, I don't know if I think so, but I get why other people think so. And he's certainly taller, which does matter.
Right.
Ben Shepherd's good and young and on a cost control deal too. I suppose he could be thrown in as an upgrade and a bigger deal. So that leaves like Jarris, same thing. If a team really loves him as a recent lottery pick, they should think very hard about that, I guess, but not right now as they figure out their salary reality. And that leaves Obi Toppin, who I talked about a lot last summer, as like if they're going to re-sign Turner, maybe the most likely guy they would have to move off of to do so, because his salary fits into MLEs next year. I suppose they could be forward thinking with that. If something opens up for him this year, he's playing quite well right now, plays every game. Same thing where they'd have to trade him for somebody who makes less than him. So I suppose if you made me put like a fifth name to watch, it would be him, just because he's their fourth highest paid player, but not their fourth best player. But Obi
Yeah.
Toppin's good and fits the
Yes.
Pacers better than any other team in the league. And so I hope now that as we've kind of run through everybody, the point has gotten to you that because of their financial reality and their slow start and their proximity to the tax and aprons and the fact that they're going to have tight spending next year, it's really hard for the Pacers to do something grand without giving up a lot, right? So I would imagine anything they do this year will be pretty small, and that's okay. Having a lot starting next year, they can trade all but one of their firsts. They'll get another first and 25 draft. They can trade it after they make it. Like, they'll have stuff to do something. They just this year might just not be the time. That's okay. It's just people don't like hearing that, unfortunately.
Well, and I think too is we saw last year that getting Siakam in the door wasn't like easy. It
No.
wasn't easy to accommodate. Like, it's a huge shift, and so that we've started to see that chemistry grow and the benefits of that. So doing something again with with what would end up being like, I just don't see the move that makes sense, that would be big enough, that would cost little enough to not really just gouge into all your assets and stuff, that would be worth messing with what has been a team that's finally finding their groove, that hasn't even had what I think we would both say is their best perimeter defender, just on versatility and size, in Neesmith. So like, bringing him back into the fold, that could be your acquisition for this year. Like, consider
Yeah.
that, and then be happy you got Aaron Neesmith, and then sort of reconsider in the summer when you can actually have some breathing room and not worry about messing with the current season, which we've seen backfire on the Pacers before in a lot of other instances.
We have. They also traded for a rotation player already.
Right.
They literally already did that this year. I think people forgot that already
Yes.
happened. I know it was a month
Yes.
ago. They literally already traded for their backup center in a great trade. Like, he's been great for them, and they gave up literally nothing went away. They'll have the worst pick, maybe, depending on how good they are 6 years from now. Like, that was a great trade. But that if they were $5 million from the tax, I'll make that number up. But if they're like, let's say $5 million from the tax, this would be a way different discussion, because they actually have
Yes.
wiggle rooms to do interesting things.
Yes.
But they don't. They don't. And if they're willing to pay the tax, that also changes this. But if they take back more than $2 million they send out, because they could just send out Wiseman to neutralize that, it's just hard to see how they do much anything crazy unless they know something that we don't, which is always possible. And that's how I would end this discussion, Rhett. Reminder, they are not doing something that is not the best thing they could do. They're not idiots. I hate that when people are like, that's all they could get for this guy. Yes, obviously, if they could have gotten more, they would have gotten more for the thing. I hate that. It drives me crazy. We never know what all the offers are, and so you can only go off of what you know. Please react accordingly to things. I hate being a wet blanket, but I always think that's such a crazy question. That's all they could get? Obviously, that's all they could get, guys. That's why they did the dang move. I hate that.
No, the people who do this like 18 hours a day, every day of the year, just chose to roll it over at one time. Do somebody a favor.
That's all the Raptors could get for Siakam. Oh no, a different team offered 5 first, and they were like, "Nah, we'd rather take this one." You know, like, what? What are we doing? It drives me crazy. Brett, this was great. I hope people are prepared. I'll mix in. There really hasn't been that many Pacers rumors this year. Cam Johnson, I talked about. I did the Stars just because people want to hear about it. Dorian Finney-Smith got connected to them after he already got traded. So as rumors come in, if I think they're credible or worth talking about, I'll talk about them. But given their reality, I don't think you're going to hear the Pacers name in a ton of stuff this year besides Wiseman and maybe like converting Freeman or something like that. Thank you for the time, Rhett Bauer. Where can people find you and the things you say about the NBA and the players behind you on your wall?
Not a lot great to say on a couple of these players behind my wall, between Paul George's Hickory jersey, DeJounte Murray, and Jaden McDaniels. But you can find me on X or Blue Sky, Rhett_Bauer, Rhett.Bauer. I don't remember which one it is, but more often than not, you can just find me commenting or retweeting Tony's stuff, because he says a lot of the things that I would like to say. He just says them better and gets paid to do it. So more than willing to talk, but yeah, that's where you can find me.
Big trade deadline for the Pacers last year. It's pretty rare for a team to go big trade deadlines consecutive years. Also, just a lot of factors pointing to maybe they already did their biggest trade of the year in getting Thomas Bryant. We'll see. Back tomorrow, Tuck and Pacers, Pistons. I almost said Sixers. They play the Sixers on Saturday. Pacers, Pistons. I'll be up there, so looking forward to that. Rhett, thank you for the time. Everybody, thanks for listening. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony R. East. And this podcast is there at Locked On Pacers. Till next time, everybody, have a wonderful day.